History is often written in ink, but sometimes it is written in poison. In the heart of modern China, there is a mound of earth. To the untrained eye, it looks like a simple hill, a quirk of the landscape. Farmers have walked around it for centuries. Villages have sprung up in its shadow. But the locals know better than to climb it. They know that beneath the soil, something is waiting. We have walked on the surface of the moon. We have sent robots to the deepest pressures of the Mariana Trench. We have split the atom and mapped the human genome. And yet, this simple mound remains the one place on Earth that modern science is too terrified to open. For over 2,200 years, the tomb of Qin Shi Huang, the first emperor of China, has remained sealed. Hollywood will tell you it's because of an ancient curse, a spell cast by sorcerers to rot the flesh of intruders. Folklore will tell you it's because of mechanical booby traps, crossbows rigged to shoot anyone who dares enter. But the real reason is far more disturbing. It isn't magic, it is chemistry. It is a tragedy of history that we are desperate not to repeat. Because we have tried before, once. In 1956, we opened a door that should have stayed shut. We walked into the resting place of an emperor, believing we were reclaiming history. Instead, we watched history die. Today, we are going to look beneath the soil to find out what is really hiding inside the forbidden tomb. We will uncover the catastrophic story of the Dingling excavation, the lethal rivers of mercury, and why, for the first time in human history, the greatest achievement of archaeology is to walk away.
To understand why the tomb is so dangerous, you have to understand the man who built it, Qin Shi Huang, the man who united the warring states, the man who gave China its name. He was a genius, a tyrant, and a visionary. But above all, he was a man consumed by fear. He wasn't afraid of armies, he wasn't afraid of assassins, though there were many. He was afraid of death. He spent the vast resources of his empire searching for the elixir of life. He sent Shu Fu, his court sorcerer, with a fleet of ships and 3,000 virgin boys and girls into the eastern seas to find the legendary Mount Penglai, home of the immortals. They never returned. Some say they died at sea. Others say they landed in Japan, too afraid to come back empty-handed to a ruler who executed scholars for fun. When the emperor realized that his physical body would fail him, he decided to conquer death another way. If he couldn't live forever in this world, he would create a new one. He commissioned an acropolis, a city of the dead, that would rival his capital in life. Historical records tell us that 700,000 workers were conscripted to build it. That is more than the population of most modern cities. They dug through 3 layers of groundwater. They poured molten bronze to seal the gaps. According to Sima Qian, the grand historian writing a century later, the tomb was a marvel of engineering. The ceiling was painted with the night sky, studded with pearls to represent the stars and constellations. The floor was a topographical map of the empire. But the emperor demanded realism. A map needs water, and so the engineers brought in thousands of tons of mercury, liquid silver, heavy, toxic, beautiful. Sima Qian wrote that 100 rivers of mercury were made to flow mechanically, circulating forever in the darkness, mimicking the Yellow River in the Yangtze. For centuries, historians mocked this detail. Exaggeration, they said. Myth, they said. How could an ancient civilization pump industrial quantities of rare metal underground? It was impossible. But science has a way of turning myths into facts. In the 1980s, and again in the early 2000s, geophysicists scanned the soil of the tomb mound. They weren't looking for gold, they were testing for chemical anomalies. The results were shocking. The soil samples revealed mercury levels up to 280 times higher than the surrounding Earth. And when they mapped the hotspots of radiation, the distribution perfectly matched the layout of the Qin Empire's water systems. The historian was telling the truth. The emperor is literally floating in a sea of poison. The world forgot about the tomb for 2 millennia until the spring of 1974. A farmer named Yang Jifa was digging a well in the dry fields of Xi'an. He was desperate for water. His shovel hit something hard. He thought it was a kiln or perhaps a demon. He pulled out a head, a clay head. That accidental strike revealed the 8th wonder of the world, the Terracotta Army. 8,000 soldiers, 13 chariots, 520 horses. It is an artistic miracle. No two faces are alike. Some scholars believe that the emperor ordered actual living soldiers to stand for portraits, ensuring his army in the afterlife would be real individuals, not just clones. But the army gave us our first warning. When archaeologists uncovered the bronze swords held by these clay soldiers, they were stunned. The swords were buried in damp earth for 2,200 years. They should have been rusted scrap metal. Instead, they were shiny, razor sharp. They could still slice through a stack of paper. Analysis revealed they were coated in a 10-micron layer of chromium oxide. Chromium plating is a technology the West didn't patent until 1937 and 1950. The Qin engineers had mastered it before Jesus was born. If they could preserve metal for 2 millennia, what else could they preserve? Could the booby trap Simon Chen described, the automated crossbows triggered by tripwires, still work? Could the mechanisms, protected by the same advanced anti-rust technology, still be waiting to fire? It is a terrifying thought. But the threat of physical injury is not what stops us. We have robots. We have armor. The reason we stop is because of what happened at Dingling.
The year was 1956. The People's Republic of China was young. There was a fierce desire to prove that the new nation could reclaim its past, that it could handle scientific excavations as well as the West. A group of prominent scholars, led by the intellectual giant Guo Moruo, set their sights on the Ming tombs. They wanted to open the tomb of the Yongle Emperor, the builder of the Forbidden City. But the authorities were cautious. They suggested a trial run first, a smaller tomb. They chose Dingling, the resting place of the Wanli Emperor. The Wanli Emperor was a tragic figure himself. He ruled for 48 years, the longest in the Ming dynasty. But for the last 20 years of his life, he refused to leave the Forbidden City. He refused to see his ministers. He was a recluse, a prisoner of his own power. He wanted to be left alone. History would not grant him that wish. Finding the entrance was a nightmare. For months, the team dug blindly. Local superstitions said the emperor's ghost was hiding the door. Workers fell ill. Lightning struck the dig site. But then, a stroke of luck, or perhaps a curse in disguise. They found a small stone tablet buried in the dirt. It was a finger stone left by the ancient builders. It gave precise measurements to the tunnel entrance. The emperor had left a key to his own robbery. It took a year to clear the tunnel. Finally, they reached the Diamond Wall. They pushed open the massive marble doors. The air inside was stale, trapped for 3 centuries. They walked into the silent underground palace, and there, in the rear chamber, sat 3 massive red lacquer coffins, the Wanli Emperor and his 2 empresses, Xiao Duan and Xiao Jing. This was the moment. The archaeologists, breathless, pried open the heavy lid. What they saw was breathtaking. The emperor lay there, his body skeletal, but his surroundings immaculate. He was wrapped in layers of gold-woven brocade. He wore a black felt helmet. Beside him were rolls of silk, porcelain, and wooden artifacts. The colors were vivid. The gold threads sparkled. The intricate embroidery of dragons and phoenixes looked as if it had been stitched yesterday. But then, the invisible killer struck: oxygen. For 300 years, the artifacts had existed in a delicate anaerobic balance. The sudden rush of fresh, moist air triggered an immediate, violent chemical reaction: rapid oxidation.
It happened in front of their eyes. Within minutes, the brilliant reds turned to dull brown. The structural integrity of the silk collapsed. The robes that had survived centuries turned to brittle carbon. When the archaeologists tried to touch them, to save them, they crumbled into black dust. They watched helplessly as priceless art, data, and history evaporated. They injected preservatives, but it was too late. The damage was done the moment the seal was broken. But the tragedy of Dingling didn't end with the artifacts. It ended with the emperor himself. 10 years later, in 1966, the Cultural Revolution swept through China. The Red Guards, zealous and destructive, stormed the Dingling Museum. They dragged the remains of the Wanli Emperor and his 2 empresses out of the warehouse. They denounced him as a feudal landlord, a parasite. On a rainy afternoon, in front of a shouting crowd, they piled the bones of the emperor and his wives onto a pyre of wood. They lit the match. The bones burned. The rain came down, turning the ash into mud. The Wanli Emperor was gone. Not just his tomb, but his very existence was erased. The excavation of Dingling is now cited as one of the greatest tragedies in archaeological history, a lesson written in ash. This is why we tremble before the tomb of Qin Shi Huang. If we made such a mistake with a tomb that was only 300 years old, what would happen to a tomb that is 2,200 years old? The terracotta warriors have already given us a preview of this destruction. We see the warriors as gray clay, but they weren't born that way. When they were first unearthed, they were painted in shocking colors: Chinese purple, cinnabar red, jade green. But the lacquer used to paint them is sensitive to humidity. When brought from the damp earth into the dry air of Xi'an, the lacquer layer curls and flakes off. It takes 15 seconds. Imagine that. You spend 2,000 years guarding your emperor, and 15 seconds after meeting the modern world, your face falls off. Inside the main tomb, there are likely libraries of bamboo slips, silk paintings, wooden chariots, perhaps even the emperor's body encased in jade. These organic materials are infinitely more fragile than terracotta. If we open the door today, the rush of new air, the change in humidity, and the bacteria we carry would act like a bomb. The scrolls containing the lost history of the Qin dynasty would turn to dust before we could even read the first character. We would be destroying the very thing we seek to save.
So, is the door closed forever? Maybe not. The future of archaeology isn't shovels, it's physics. Scientists are currently proposing the use of muon tomography. Muons are subatomic particles created when cosmic rays hit our atmosphere. They rain down on us all the time, passing through solid rock like X-rays pass through flesh. By placing detectors underneath and around the tomb, we can measure how these particles are absorbed by different densities. Stone absorbs differently than wood. Metal absorbs differently than air. This could allow us to create a perfect 3D model of the interior. We could see the layout of the treasures, locate the rivers of mercury, and maybe, just maybe, see the silhouette of the emperor himself. All without lifting a single shovel of dirt, without letting a single molecule of oxygen inside. Qin Shi Huang spent his life trying to cheat death. He failed to find the elixir, but in his death, he achieved something even more remarkable. He built a puzzle that 2,000 years of human advancement cannot solve. He created a defense system not of arrows and traps, but of our own fear and conscience. He holds the world hostage with his own fragility. For now, the rivers of mercury continue to flow in the dark. The emperor sleeps, and if we learned anything from the ashes of the Wanli Emperor, it is that some doors are meant to stay closed.